Right. So, what we discussed in the last session about the basic program in context to the hello world of Python is what something which I explained in the previous session. As I stated earlier in the last session, wherein whenever we are working on any programming, okay, either it can be a Python programming or it can be Java programming or something like. This is always important for you to know the basics of it, right? So what are the different syntaxes which normally we use? It's not only about the syntaxes, something like functions, comments, right? So values, all that. But it is also important for us to know about what are the different key concepts which are used when you are writing any programming, because Python is a programming language, as it told you, widely used in the field of data analysis for a very long time. So we must be knowing about what are the different key concepts that are used in the Python, right? So whatever I'm going to discuss about the kind of basics of Python and what are the syntaxes are we going to use. Okay, basic Python basics as less syntax is what something which I'm going to discuss today. When we are going to discuss about Python, yeah, so whenever we are discussing about Python, whenever we are going to write any kind of programs, there are different data types which normally we use. That's what in the beginning yesterday told you. Data type, nothing but it's a value, okay? Because first thing which we have to know when we are writing any program is called value, okay? What is meant by value stands for. The first one is that we call it as value. What is value is all about. Value means that the information or a data type, what is that you are mentioning in the code, right? So this is what generally we call it as value. So value is nothing but data type. Data type means types of data. For example, it can be a customer name, right? Name. Customer name is in the text field, right? You are writing a name of a customer in alphabetical order, which is a text value. Text value. Or else it can be a numeric. Let's say you want to mention about his phone number or something. Number is a numerical value. Okay. Next, you want to know something like if else condition, true and false, all that. That itself is called a Boolean value. Okay. 2, 3 things we need to know. Because when you talk about value, when we are writing it down in any program, the first thing what is that you need to know is the value of what we are mentioning in the code. Generally, value is nothing but a data type, because these are the basics which, as I told you, which we need to know. Data type means whatever the data you are mentioning, what type of data? Is it a text data? Means maybe, which is in alphabetical order, right? Maybe name, or it can be designation. It can be of anything. Or else the value can be a numeric value. Numeric value can be, it can be phone number, or it can be ID number, right? So these are all we call it as numeric values. But generally, again, when you're talking about the value, these values will have, some values will have decimals, some values doesn't have any decimals, okay? So values whichever doesn't have any value, any decimals and all, everything is called, we call it as integers. But whereas when it comes to the value decimals, right? So any decimal values and all everything, that's called, we call it as float. Okay. So now when we are trying to understand about value, means types of values and all, types of values will be classified as follows. First one is called string. Okay. First one is called string. Second one is called integer. Okay. Third one is called float. Fourth one is called boolean. Fourth one is called boolean. Means first one is called text. Text is a value, right? So text is a value, right? So when it comes to the string, right? So string represents you the text value. This represents the text value. Text value means, as I told you, name, it can be designation, right? So these are all comes under the text value, which represents the text value. This is what we call it as string stands for. It can be a customer name, it can be a customer ID. Whatever we're mentioning in the alphabet is called string. Second is called integer, especially when it comes to the numerical value, because number, as I told you, right? For example, you want to mention the phone number of a person. There will be no decimals, okay? There will be no decimal number. You have one total numbering will be there. It can be 10 digits or it can be less or more, whatever it is, right? So it can be a single numeric value which doesn't have any integers. If you take any customer ID or if you have taken any what we call phone number, contact number, all that. But sometimes, let's say, for example, you want to mention the marks, right? You want to mention the marks, like, so numerical value, because numbering of marks is also a numerical value or a percentage, which may be having decimals. Let's say, for example, 63.8, right? So 63.8 percentage, right? So when you are calculating the percentage, especially in the numerical value, whatever the number value which is having a decimal place, that is what we call it as float. So when we are using a value which is a numerical one, which doesn't have any decimals, which is called integer. If that value, numerical value has decimals, that is called float. Okay. Now, integer nothing but number value which doesn't have any decimal. Okay. Any decimal places. Right. So, because for example, right. So, for example, if you don't have any decimals for that number value, generally it is called integer, right? Because that's what we call it as integer. Now, next one about float, right? Float. It's a number value because, as I told you, numbering value classifies into two, integer and float. Integer doesn't have any decimals. But when it comes to the float, yes, it has decimals. Number value which has decimal places. Okay, that's what we call it as decimals are. This is what generally we call it as float. So when we are trying to understand the code, whenever you're trying to understand the code or whenever you're writing down the code, because business logic implementation is what something which being a data analyst you have to do, because how you have to study the data is important, how to study the code, right? That is important. At the same time, how to read the code is important sometimes. Sometimes you have to implement the business logic, because let's say last time I told you, right? 1 plus 2 equal to 3, adding of two numbers. Adding of two numbers is a functionality. So for that, you have to write a business logic using print command, all that. Okay. Because in the yesterday session, I have told you print command, using the print command. we need to give the business logic for addition of two numbers. It can be 1 plus 2. It can be 200, 500 plus 300. It can be of any two numbers. Adding of two numbers. Now, when we are working on adding of two numbers in context to the addition of two numbers or something like, it's always important for you to understand the business logic behind. Because programming, because yesterday I told you, because system wants to understand the instructions which was given by you. That is possible only with this. Because without this, it won't be possible for them to, for that system to understand, right? So that's the reason why floating integer value doesn't have any decimals. If you are writing a code, it doesn't have any decimals. Okay, for a particular numerical value you are mentioning, that's what we call it as integer. Because people may ask you, can you explain this code? So that you have to tell what exactly this represents. For example, they will show you the number value. When they show the number value, they may ask you, and context to the interview I'm talking about, at least to understand it, right? So when people are showing you something, right? So showing you some number, and if they ask you, okay, what will be this, right? Exactly this represents. So you must tell what exactly it was. Okay, so integer value as well as the float value represents decimals and as well as non-decimals and all that. Now, the next one, which is called another data type, value, which is called Boolean. Okay. Boolean represents true or false. Okay, if else conditions, true or false. For example, how can I say? For example, you are a user, you are using a ATM system. Listen carefully. When you are trying to withdraw money from an ATM system, when you get the money, when your account balance is lesser than the amount whatever you are mentioning, then only you get the money. Okay. Let us assume that you are mentoring a money, some X amount of money, which is there, which is above than your account balance. What will happen now? You get a message. What was the message? Insufficient funds. So system has to understand. We have to write a business logic when we are writing a business logic for a withdrawal of money. But let's say that you are writing a program to withdraw money from the ATM system. When you're trying to withdraw money from an ATM system, what is that you have to do? First of all, you have to write a business logic for that. That business logic is not just something simply like deposit a kind of stuff. Because deposits majorly focusing on the denomination. How much denomination of currency you are mentioning, you are putting in it. So whenever you are inserting any money in the ATM machine, what will happen? It will recount and it will show you on the screen what is the currency you have taken. Let's say, for example, in rupee, let's say, for example, for your better understanding even, for example, rupees we are somewhere around 20,000 rupees is what something we are depositing in the ATM machine. So whenever you insert the money, it will denominate and it will show you on the screen how many currency. Let's say 2000 is a note, right? So how many 2000 you have, how many 500s you have, etc. All that, right? So this is all something it will show you. So this is for denomination calculation, deposits. But major logic lies when you are withdrawing the money. When you are withdrawing money, because withdrawing money is more important. Why? This is where generally logic has to be implemented. What is the logic? Greater than, lesser than, true or false, right? So this is where generally this Boolean come into picture. Larger, lesser. For example, greater than so and so, it has to give that no, right? Insufficient funds. Lesser than the account balance of a particular sum X kind of, automatically you get the money from the ATM machine. So this instruction should be written in a form of business logic by a developer, whoever is writing the code for a particular project, maybe to withdraw money. Right? So withdrawal of money is one functionality, for example. So to represent that, okay, to represent true or false, if else condition, greater than, lesser than. So these sort of things, the kind of value, whatever the kind of data type which normally we call it is called Boolean. Okay. You guys are following? Yes, sir.
Following, yes.
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 Okay, fine. Right. So this is where generally we call it as value. We call it as value as string. String represents the text number. Integer represents the numeric value which doesn't have any decimals. Float represents the numeric value which has decimals. Boolean, which represents true and false. Okay, this is first one. Second one, which is called variable. Okay, that's where generally we use called variable declaration, right? So variable declaration, all that, right? This is where generally variable stands for. Okay, so what is variable? Variable, nothing but this is the one which will be used to store the value or values. Okay, this is what generally we call it as variable stands for. Variable is a declaration. So what kind of declaration? Variable is a declaration where in this declaration this is the variable or a declaration which is that we are using if you want to use to store any kind of value. Means if you want to store any kind of value or values and all to the any business logic you are implementing while you are writing down the programs, all that. Generally, variable is what something which normally we use. Okay, but there is an to identify that, because variable is a if you want to identify the variable and all that which has a unique name that you choose. Okay, this is what generally we call it as variable stands for. That's a variable declaration is what something which we call it as, right? So if you want to store any, used to store any kind of value or something like value or values and all that. So there will be a unique name which normally we you choose. This is where we call it as variable. Variable declaration means declaring the variable. This is the second thing. Second, these are all keywords. Okay, these are all the keywords. The third one is called operator. Okay. Third one which is called operator. Yeah. Third one which is called operator. So what is meant by an operator? Operator, nothing but this is the one which will be used to, if you want, you can write a note, which will be used to assign a value to a variable. Okay, this is where generally operator stands for. Means operator is the one which normally we use. If, for example, if you want to assign a value to a particular variable, okay, whatever the storage values are we representing, that value can be, normally those values will be numerical value, for example, right? So numerical value is what something which you are storing in that particular variable. So if you want to assign any kind of value for that, generally uh, the kind of functionality which the kind of keywords which normally we use is called operator. Okay. So this is majorly because when generally operators use is that, for example, any math calculation, as I told you, right? For example, 1 plus 2, okay, or 2 divided by 3, or so multiplication or division, subtractions. If there is any math calculation which is involved, generally these operators are used. Operators are not used for regular programming. It means it's not for regular thing. Means if you want to any kind of doing any kind of math calculation, as it told you, 1 plus 2, right? Addition, subtraction, division, multiplication, right? So any math calculations and all everything, this is what generally it is being used, operator. So this is the one which is used to assign a value to a variable, majorly used for math between two values or variables. Okay. Generally, for that reason, generally operator is what something which normally we use. Either it can be a value or it can be a variable, because variable is part of the value. Okay, because variable how you are giving storing the values. Okay, value is what you are giving. This value you are storing in variable. This value you are storing in the variable. So that value again can be, it can be a text value, it can be an integer value, it can be a float value, it can be a boolean value. Whatever is that, if you want to store it, you require a variable. Okay. So whenever you are requiring your variables or values and all that, if you want to assign any value for that, whatever the keyword are we going to use is called operator. Okay. This is operator, we call it as. Next, after operator, the next one is called function. Okay. Next one is called function. Function is what something which we have to use, right? So this is the one which will be used, repeatedly, okay? Repeatedly, okay? When it requires. It means this is what we call it as pre-writing, okay? Rewriting of code, because the same code you want to use it for multiple times. Okay, for example, same calculation of the functionality, wherein if you want to use it for multiple times and all everything, this is where generally this function will come into picture. Okay, function means this. Function means this is the one which normally we use to repeatedly when it is required and all. Means the same pre-writing of code you are using repeatedly n number of times. So this is where generally we call it as function. So variable, nothing but data types, all that. Of a value, nothing but variable, nothing but storage of values. Operators, nothing but assigning a value to the variable or value or variable, whatever it can be. Function, nothing but there is a functionality of rewriting the code which can be used for multiple times. Okay, because the same functionality or the same key, same functionalities you are writing, you are using it for n number of times. Repetition, I'm talking about, right? Repetition and all that. So further, generally, this functions and all everything is what something which normally we use. Next, one more keyword is called print, because because yesterday I have shown you when I'm writing the first programming, I have um, I have created for Hello World program, wherein I have mentioned it as print. Okay, print. So print, this is the one which is called functions that display a string in the console. Okay, this is what generally we call it as console stands for. Okay, whatever the Python programming editor. Okay, this programming editor is called console. This is what we call it as console stands for. This is what we call it as console. Console means where if you want to write any kind of code and all everything, this console is something which normally we use. This is what generally we call as console stands for. So this console is the one which is normally used to write any functions and all. Yesterday I've shown you, right? Hello world related. Print function, right? So print function is what something. Print is what generally the function I have written. Printing of hello world, right? Printing of I want to learn Python, right? So these are all something which you have to print. Means if you want to print any kind of function, which normally displays the kind of strings in the console and all everything. Means when you are going to write any programming and all, wherein you are going to start with print, okay? In the particular console, this is also one of the variable which normally we use. This is what something which normally we call it as print function on that. Next one. Next one is called error. Okay. Next one is called error. So this is the one which represents the text displayed in the console. Console means this editor, whatever the Python editor and all that, right? When Python detects any mistake, for example, uh, let's say, for example, semicolon was written. Okay, semicolon is what something we have used. For example, when you are writing this, I have used a semicolon. Whatever the error I am going to get, for example, right? So print, right? So for example, right, I'm using hello world. Okay, that's what I'm just writing. Right. Hello world I've written. Let's say, for example, I have used it like this. Here you can see there is an error, right? Name of the error, it is you defined because there is some mistake which was happened when you are writing down a program. There is some error is coming in it. So to establish the error or to show the error and all, whatever the keyword are we going to use is called error. Means this is where, because if you can see here, there was no program which was executed. Why? Because there is no print. For example, print we have used. Okay, again I'm showing you print we have used. Hello world. Okay. Let's say, for example, I'm using this. Now you got the result. Why? Because there is a symbol here which was missed here. So due to because of the exclamation, this symbol, what is happening here? Because of this, there was an error. Am I audible now? Am I audible?
Yes, you are.
Okay.
Yes.
Right. So here you can see error. Why you got the error? Because there was which I have missed it. Right. So what is happened? There is a name of error for print which is not defined. So here it was executed. So whatever the errors we make, because especially in line of coding when you write, even for example, if you are missing any comma or full stop or any decimal symbols or something like, code won't get executed. So that's the reason why, again, I'm repeatedly saying basics of programming is essentially important for everything. Because where we use comma, where we use full stop, where we use asterisk symbol, right? So all these semicolons, where we use semicolons, all these things we have to learn being basic. For example, here I have not used it when I want to execute a print code, right? When I've written a print command. So as in when I didn't use it, automatically you got an error. So this is where generally this text value, which is called error, is all about, right? This is what generally we call it as error stands for. Error generally represents you this, right? So this is where generally this error and all everything is what something which normally we are getting it. Next, after error, the next one is called statement. Okay, statement. This is the one which was written as a single code that does something, right? So this is what we call it as statement. Just now, whatever that we have written is called a statement, okay? Because statement is what something which normally we have written. It can be a sentence or it can be of any subject or a verb, right? So whatever it is and all. So this is all something we call it as a statement, right? So print is a statement, right? That's what generally I have written, right? So print statement is what something. If you want to see the execution of hello world example, print is what generally the statement which normally we use. That's what we call it as statement stands for. So next one is called yeah. Next one is called comment. Next one is called comment. This one, uh, this is the one. This is the key value, which is the one. What I can say, which was not interpreted by Python. For example, Python is not interpreting anything. Okay. So whatever you have mentioned, that is called comment, right? So there is a comment. Your example, if you want to use to explain what exactly this code is, right? So what exactly the code am I doing now? Hello world is an example I have written. Or else if you want to add two numbers, or if you want to know about the Fibonacci series or something. So if I want to explain about that code, what exactly that code meant for, it can be Fibonacci series, it can be adding of two values, subtraction, deletion, so division, multiplication, all that. Whatever the comment I am going to write, that comment is not something which is presented by Python. Python is not saying that, but I am writing a comment. I am writing a comment which I am explaining about the particular code which was written by me. That's what generally we call it as comment stands for. Next, one more keyword which normally we use. If whatever that you have seen today, now even it is called console. Here we see the program output. Okay, this is what we call it as console stands for. Whatever this Python, this one, right? So the screen, whatever you can see, this is what we call it as console. This is the one which is normally used to write any code or something. If you want to write programming and all, this is what generally console is being used for. If you want to see any kind of results, right? Hello world result you can see. Or as for example, there were some errors. You want to see that errors. So for everything and all, console is what something which normally we use it. So these are the basic key concepts or keywords which normally we want to learn if you want to become a Python development. Means if you want to know about Python programming, either you may be a developer or you may be an analyst, data analyst, whenever you want to use any Python. When you want to learn programming, first of all, you must be knowing about what is value stands for, what is variable stands for, what is operator stands for, what is function means, what is print means, what is error means, what is meant by statement, what is meant by comment, what is meant by console, right? So this is all something which you have to learn. Okay, these are all which normally, which we call it as key concepts or keywords, is what is all about. Tomorrow I'm going to explain you the syntaxes, because there are some basic syntaxes we want to use. So that part, syntax part, I'm going to discuss in tomorrow session.